Russia experienced significant tank losses due to various factors. One of the main reasons is the FPV, first-person view, drone, as the most prominent weapon, capable of targeting the tank's most vulnerable areas from above. Ukrainian forces operating on the east bank of the Dnieper River have been using first-person view, uncrewed aerial vehicles, FPV UAVs, fitted with munitions to target Russian forces. Ukrainian forces appeared to blow up a Russian column of 11 tanks and armored vehicles. The UK Ministry of Defence has released an intelligence update revealing Ukrainian forces' impactful use of first-person view uncrewed aerial vehicles, FPV UAVs. Operating on the east bank of the Dnieper River, these drones have been a key element in targeting Russian forces, marking a new phase in drone warfare. According to one Russian blogger, almost 90% of Russian vehicles in the Krinky sector have been destroyed. The success of the Ukrainian forces in using these drones is partly attributed to Russia's apparent weakness in countering such technology. The update from the UK Defence Intelligence suggests that Russia's inability to counter these FPV UAVs is probably due to a lack of Russian electronic warfare capabilities in the area. This gap has given the Ukrainian forces a crucial advantage, allowing them to conduct precise and effective strikes against Russian military assets. Researchers from Toshnin Info, a project focusing on analyzing data on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, have published an article featuring statistics of FPV drone usage by both Ukrainian and Russian militaries from August 2023 till February 27, 2024. The analysis is based on open-source intelligence gathered by a user nicknamed eAndrew Perpetua and confirmed, including the identification of exact locations where each FPV strike occurred. Similar to an earlier analysis by GeoConfirmed, this research does not reflect the situation comprehensively, but gives the insight necessary to pinpoint the trends and make certain conclusions. The project's authors divided all recorded instances into three categories: FPV strikes on infantry, defensive positions, and vehicles, respectively. To date, Ukraine maintains an advantage in terms of strikes on vehicles, outnumbering the Russians by more than 3 times. 2 of 57 recorded FPV strikes launched by Ukrainian forces versus 632 on the Russian side. The FPV UAVs, equipped with munitions, are being used in a coordinated effort with artillery to target and neutralize Russian military vehicles. According to estimates from a Russian military blogger, these efforts have led to a staggering destruction of 90% of Russian military equipment in the Krinky sector. This figure underscores the significant impact of the Ukrainian strategy and the effectiveness of FPV UAVs in modern warfare if it still needs to be proven. The situation of the Russian forces near Krinky, on the left bank of the Dnieper in southern Ukraine, is increasingly precarious. About 90% of Russian military vehicles deployed in this area are suffering losses, highlighting a largely unfavorable combat dynamic. This dire situation for the Russians is mainly due to the tactical and technological superiority of the Ukrainian forces. The effective use of explosive-laden FPV UAVs, combined with local air control, has allowed the Ukrainians to dominate in the clashes. Their ability to jam the communications of Russian drones while preserving their links has been a critical factor in this supremacy. The Ukrainian Marines of the 35th Brigade have played a crucial role in this success. Despite the losses incurred, they have inflicted considerable damage on Russian forces, including the 8th Marine Brigade, the 104th Air Assault Division, and various army regiments. The Ukrainian advantage in drone reconnaissance has enabled them to effectively target enemy positions with artillery, leading to massive destruction of Russian military equipment. Although Ukraine has suffered losses, particularly in terms of boats, their ability to maintain supply lines despite Russian attempts to cut them off by air and sea demonstrates their resilience and tactical ingenuity. The Ukrainian foothold on the other side of the Dnieper is solid. Despite the significant losses suffered by Russian forces in the Krinky sector and elsewhere, there have been many reports of Russia ramping up its production of military vehicles in an attempt to replenish its depleted ranks. This increase in production is seen as a direct response to the heavy casualties inflicted by Ukrainian FPV UAVs and artillery. However, analysts still need to be convinced about whether this boost in manufacturing will be sufficient to compensate for the extensive losses. As the Ukrainian forces demonstrate their ability to utilize advanced warfare technologies effectively, the question remains if the sheer number of new Russian vehicles can effectively turn the tide in their favor. As the conflict continues, the effectiveness of such technologies and tactics will undoubtedly shape the course of military actions in Ukraine. FPV UAVs are a clear example of how unmanned systems are becoming increasingly significant in modern warfare, offering new possibilities and challenges in conflict scenarios. On a note from Defense Express, this decrease might be attributed to a shortage of drones in the Army and a partial redistribution of available resources. As we can see, Ukraine slightly prevails in the number of total FPV strikes on enemy infantry, 1,779 versus 1,752. But right now, Russians are starting to outrun Ukrainians with 655 versus 533 strikes recorded in January. It is important to note the speed of growth in numbers, indicating the Russian effort to scale up the usage of drones. The number of strikes on infantry went up by 300% in November and spiked again by 150% in December. Ukraine's indexes, meanwhile, are growing too, although not so steeply. At the same time, there's a clear difference in the number of strikes against defensive positions. With the Russian army being almost 10 times ahead, this could be partially explained by Ukrainians strategically prioritizing to undermine the Russian offensive by targeting their combat and particularly transport vehicles that provide logistical support for Russian operations. Notable is the expert's perspective on how FPV drones have changed the modern battlefield. While trenches once offered protection from shelling, the introduction of FPV drones, including the threat posed from drone-drop munitions, has drastically changed the level of protection which trenches offer to infantry. The overall conclusion drawn by analysts from Toknai.info is that currently, Ukraine has a slight advantage in the use of FPV drones on the battlefield, 3,886 versus 2,889. But if the situation does not change, Russia may catch up in a few days.